Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another video here on ON1 Photos. Today, we're going to actually do a quick edit in the new version of ON1 Photo RAW 2026. Now, if you want to pick it up and save a little bit of money, consider using the coupon code FreeWillPhotos20. It'll save you some money when you check out, and I make a small commission. It's a win-win because you save money and you support the channel at the same time if you so choose. Now, let's go ahead and jump into ON1 Photo RAW and take a look at editing with some of the new tools. So here we are inside of ON1, and right now I don't have any new tools open, but I do have a photo. And of course, if you want to download this, check the description box below. There's a link. You can get this image and you can follow along with me if you have the 2026 version of ON1. Now, first thing that I want to do is one of my basic tips or things, which is Resize AI. So we'll just go ahead and activate that. Here's the look of it before and after. Now, I do have Resize AI tuned, but I'm not going to go into that. Nonetheless, I find with this particular image, I like to have this a little bit of a lower amount of Resize AI. So it's not doing a whole lot of work, but it is doing something. It's opening the shadows here in the foreground. It's also doing a little bit of shadow lifting in the midground. And then in the background, it's also brightening things up. But I want to really hone in the light in this particular image. So my goal is to make the foreground a little bit darker, make the midground and the background just a little bit brighter, and really, separating that tonal value. So what I'm going to do is skip the local tab and jump into the effects tab. Now, if you followed any of my other videos, you'll know that I had a different workspace, and now I have created another workspace, and I'm really enjoying the effects starting points, which is just giving me all of these tools or filters available. So when I jump over to effects, it allows me to do that. Now, I do want to orient you just a little bit to what I have going on here. At the bottom, I have light options, okay? Things that are going to manipulate the light in the image. So curves, and then the new tool, depth lighting. This is new in 2026. And then I have color tools. You'll see that I have color grading, color enhancer, and color editor. And we can even include black and white as one of those color tools. And then I have contrast tools. So the way that I'm starting to work as I develop my editing style even further is, first I want to manipulate the light. Then I want to manipulate the color. And then following that, I want to manipulate the actual contrast or give it contrast. So what I've been calling this is light color flare. That's kind of my editing style. So that's what we're going to do here in this particular image. So the first thing that I want to do is just work with the curve, because I think that every image should have some type of curve response. So let's just go ahead and do the basic S curve. And this is nothing new. This is literally the move that you've seen people make often, where they darken the shadows and then they increase the highlights. I'm doing the exact same thing here. So if I turn this off, turn it back on, you can see I'm really developing some contrast in the entire image. And I do like what I'm getting here. So I'm going to go ahead and close that down. Now, what this allows me to do, and the reason why I enjoy doing this particular workflow, is I can now apply the depth lighting, again, new tool in 2026, above my curves filter. So the curve is being impacted by whatever adjustments I make with the depth lighting. And remember, at the beginning, or as we started editing this image, I mentioned that I wanted to darken the foreground and brighten the background. I know words. So I'm going to start with the background, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull this up, and I'm only looking at the background here. I'm not worried about the trees in the foreground. I'm gonna just go ahead and pull this up until I get to a point where I enjoy it. And I think that's about right. Now, the way that I like to test this is turn off the effect and then turn it back on. You just go back and forth until you figure out like where that looks the best, right? Then I'll come down to the temperature here, and I want the background to be a little bit warmer because I want to separate the foreground and background that much more. So color separation really does help. So let's just go ahead and pull up on the background temperature here. And I think that that looks pretty good. Let's turn this off, turn it back on. It's starting to come together. Now, what I need to do is establish the depth mask for this particular image, because right now it's kind of at the default depth and it may or may not be what you want it to be. And I want to be clear that the depth mask that is being created here is secondary. It's like built into the depth lighting. This depth slider is built into the filter. It is not my effect mask. Case in point, if I wanted to add an additional mask onto this image, I could come to the actual masking icon here and I can apply a completely different mask. You could do all kinds of stuff with this, but I digress from that, and we'll go ahead and hold down our Option key. That'll be Alt on a PC. And if I click and drag this depth slider, you'll get an overlay of how the built-in depth option, or mask, if you will, we'll call it a depth selection, just to keep it separate, because I don't want people to get confused that this is an additional mask. This is literally just choosing what parts are the foreground and what parts are the background. So anything that's in white is going to be the foreground, and anything that's in black is going to be the background. So what I want to do is I want to create more of a background look. So, or apply this look more to the background. And so I'm going to pull this to the left, and that makes the background more selected. So I'm getting that background effect there. Now, this is really going to come into full effect when I pull down on this foreground and watch these trees in the front here. You see how those just start to get really dark. Now, that's overdoing it, so I'll probably pull it down somewhere about here. Again, turning this off, turn it back on. I'm really starting to get a different look in the image, and I've only worked with the light and just a little bit of color with the depth lighting here. So now what I want to do is jump into modifying the color in the image. Again, this is just a new workflow that I'm testing out to figure out if I enjoy it so I can get consistent looks. And having these effect starting points has just been extremely helpful because I don't have to think what tools are available to me to do that. I just say, okay, well, how do I want to apply color to this image? Now, I'm actually okay overall with the color that's in the image. So I actually want to apply a grade to the image, which is just going to give me like an infusion of color. So that's where the color grading comes in. I'm going to go ahead and activate that, and we'll just scroll down a little bit to bring that into focus. And if you're not familiar with the color grading, that's okay. Just think of it as applying color based off of the luminance values. And the sliders here, or the pucks as they like to call them, is shadows. So the darkest tones in the image, I can apply color to that. And then midtones, they're the gray colors, or the gray tones, I should say. Those are going to be right in the middle. And I can apply color to that. And then we have highlights, and those are the brightest tones in the image, and you can apply color to that. So what I'm going to do is really focus in on, again, this area here, which has some shadow representation in it. So the colors that I'm applying, I'm really focusing in over here because I'm going to mask it away from this foreground area. So I'm just going to go ahead and start playing around until I find a color that I think looks well. with this image, especially in those shadows, because again, I want to go for a more warmth look in the middle. All right. Let's see, maybe brighten that just a bit, and then let's play with the midtones. And I think another warm color is going to make sense here, but it doesn't need to be as saturated. So maybe we'll go with something like that. And what this is doing is darkening and brightening that color that I'm applying. So maybe we'll bring the midtones down just to counteract what's happening with what I just did with the shadows. And then with the highlights, I typically go with like a really, really bright yellow. And I don't like what it's doing to the sky there. So I'm just going to go ahead and reset the highlights by clicking right here in the middle. So I'll just leave the highlights set to 0. And I think that this is going to work out just fine. So if I turn this off and turn it back on, you can see it just warms up the image overall. So now I need to apply that mask. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use another depth mask just to show you the difference between the depth lighting tool, which uses the same algorithm to make the selection. But if I want to apply the depth mask separate, I could just right click on this mask and click create depth mask. Now, this aspect is nothing new to ON1 Photo RAW. We've seen this before. If I press the letter O, look, there's my overlay, and that looks exactly like what we just had in the depth lighting tool. But with the new masking options, we can really fine tune the way that this works. So what I'm going to do is actually invert this mask. And so I'm going to come to mask layers, and I'm going to hit the 3-line menu for the depth option. And I'm going to click invert. And you can see now anywhere where white is, I'm going to apply this color grade look. And anywhere there is gray, it's not going to get much of that look. So if I press the letter O, you can see how the back of the image is really warm and the front of the image, not so much. So if I turn this off and turn it on, it really does make sense in that regard. Now, if I press the letter O to get my masking overlay, I can go ahead and grab this distance slider underneath the mask layers. And what this allows me to do is really fine tune how that look is going to blend into the image. So if I turn off that masking overlay by pressing the letter O, I can just go ahead and slide this around until I see it kind of fall off of the foreground and really focus in here on the background. So maybe somewhere around there makes sense. And I like what I have here. But you remember how I mentioned I didn't like what it was doing to the sky. I actually want this to kind of leave the sky alone. If you notice, the sky is just, it's blue there, but here, not as blue as I would probably like it to be. So what I can do is actually refine this mask, and that's what makes the 2026 version of ON1 so exciting. I can remove the sky from this selection up here. What I'm going to do is come over to mask layers. I'm going to hit the plus icon, and then I'm going to hit the sky, and then I'm going to subtract the sky. And so what ON1 is going to do is look up the image, find the sky, and then it's going to remove it. Now, it did the exact opposite of what I wanted it to do. It actually left the sky, or I'm sorry, it did exactly what I wanted it to do. Sorry. It went ahead and protected the sky. So if I turn this off and turn it back on, it's a very subtle adjustment, but to me, I can see it here on the computer, and I really like what is going on here. So now that I have the color grade set the way that I want it to be set, it's time to start honing in on that sky. So this is where a color enhancer comes in. I'm going to go ahead and select that, turn it on, and I'm just going to press sky here in the styles. And that's going to make things really blue, but it doesn't seem to have done much for me. So let's go to the aqua channel, and I may need to actually do something else to get this to work the way that I want it to work. So that's okay. That's why we do these types of editing tutorials. So let's go ahead and turn that off because it's not really giving me what I want, and I want to do something completely different. So I'm going to go with add filter, and we'll try a color replacement. That is here somewhere. It's not a tool that I use regularly. Color replace. There it is. So now I'm going to use my picker tool. We'll come over, grab the sky, and this is turning all of this red, and I don't want that. So I'm going to use the masking options to help me make this selection a little bit better. And to do that, what I'm going to do is first increase the range. So that way I know that I'm going to get this into the sky. This is a great way of being able to see that. I'll work with this portion of the sky here in a bit. So now what I'll do is just change this over to a blue color, maybe something like that. And let's just, nope, that's not really giving me what I want in the sky either. So maybe we won't go with a color replace. So now that we have the color grade set the way that I think it should be and the sky is protected, let's jump over to local and let's just make a sky mask. And I'm going to press the letter O, take a look at that. And that looks relatively decent. We'll see how it all works out once we start editing. But I'm going to make the sky just a little bit darker, just a little bit. And then I'm also going to come down to the temperature and make it a little bit more blue. And it looks like the sky needs some refinement here. Now, one of my favorite ways of refining these edges, you could use sliders to do that. I can come in here, click on refine mask, and I could try to use the edge shift, and that may work. It works decently well for that. So maybe I'll do that. But one of my other ways and I've been doing this for years, so I think this is a great time to mention that if you have a technique that worked in previous versions of ON1, you can continue to use those techniques. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and press the plus icon here, and I'm going to grab a brush, and I'm going to make this brush subtract from the mask because I want to remove certain areas, really these areas here on the mountain. Now, what I'm going to do is use my brush with a perfect eraser. And I have 100% feather, and I'm just going to resize it. I'm just going to paint over the edges of the mountains here. And you'll see that I start to recall that detail that I was losing. And this is my favorite way of cleaning up edges. I don't use the refine tools all that often. I personally just use these edge or the perfect eraser, or perfect brush, I should say, and just paint it away from the edges. And that's looking pretty good overall. Let's take a look at darkening that down just a bit further, just so we can see where things are going. And I think that looks a-okay. So now what we can do is let's just saturate the sky so it's even more blue. And starting to look discolored from the rest of things. So let's just brighten it back up. We'll go like that. And I really need to work on those mountains. So let's make the mountains look a little bit better. Let's go with a brush. Or actually, we're not going to go with a brush. We will go with a quick mask AI, and then we'll go ahead and paint this in. So we'll go with add, let the AI tool kind of blend or work its way through. We'll select the mountains here. just like so. And maybe even get some of and the challenge that we're going to have is this mountain is covered by this tree. So we'll just go ahead and select the tree and then we'll work around that. All right. Because that is what we got. And I'll take those foothills right there as well. And we'll hit the blue check mark to apply this mask. So that way the adjustment that we're about to make only goes into those areas. And I'm going to pull down on the exposure, push up on the contrast, and that tree, it's getting that adjustment, but it's not really that big of a deal, at least in my opinion. And then maybe we'll increase some of the structure so the mountains really do kind of shine, but not too much because I can just apply some dynamic contrast and that's going to help with these as well. And then let's throw some vibrance on there just to give the mountains a little bit more color, and maybe even saturate them. And we'll pull down on the blacks and maybe even pull back on the shadows. Now there is supposed to be atmospheric haze that's happening in the background there. So I think that overall these are getting a pretty good adjustment. I will lower the opacity of this adjustment just to blend it naturally with the rest of the image. So if we turn this off, turn it on, it does look a little bit more cohesive in my opinion. Now let's go ahead and finish this with the final look, which is the dynamic contrast. So if I turn that on, you can see it goes all over the image, but just like all of the new masking tools that are available to us, we can just go ahead and press the letter W to get our AI masking brush. And I'm just going to paint right over these mountains because I only care to have this dynamic contrast in these areas that require it. Everywhere on the image doesn't actually require that. So we'll hit the plus icon, or I'm sorry, the check to apply that mask or apply that to the mask. And you can see we have it here. Didn't update the mask icon here, but if we turn it off and we actually need a subtract mask, I think that's what's happening here. Let's invert that and we'll just delete this one, remove, add, and we'll go with a quick mask AI brush we want to add. And I'm just going to click and drag so we can select these mountain peaks and everything else that's involved. And now when I hit the blue check mark, should see dynamic contrast applied to that area. Why did that not work? Let's just reset the whole thing and start over. So reset, add, and then let's go with a subtract, see if that solves the problem. And we'll hit blue. And then, of course, let's invert this so that way we get the opposite. And there it is. All right, boom. Now we have all of that selected and the mask going in the correct places. And then the last thing that I would probably do here is throw a vignette on here. And that's right here. We'll drop a big softy. And what the vignette does is just helps pull the entire image together and make things look a little bit more interesting overall. So here's what we came into ON1 with, not a bad image. And here's the initial edit that we have applied in this amount of time. So there's the first quick edit that I did inside of ON1 Photo RAW 2026. I wasn't perfect, and I think that that's a good thing. And I wanted to leave that in this video specifically so you can see that if you want to learn how to use the software, you just got to play around with it until you get the thing that you're going for. Have an idea in mind and then learn how the tools work so that way you can be just as creative when it comes to making your end state. Now, if you want to learn how to use the software, ON1 Photo RAW 2026, consider signing up for a training call. A link for that can be found in the description box below. I'll answer your questions that you have about ON1 Photo RAW. And if you need someone there that when you're making these mistakes or the unexpected outcomes, I'll help you identify where maybe you went wrong, and then you'll learn the software a little bit faster. That's the whole point of the training calls. Now, if that's something you're interested in, check the link in the description box below. Again, if you'd like to save money when picking up Photo RAW 2026, consider using coupon code FreeWillPhotos20. You'll save some money. I make a small commission that's at no extra charge to you though, and it's a great way of supporting the channel. Until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.